The Justice Department and Securities and Exchange Commission have opened investigations into the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, the second largest bank failure in U.S. history. Now, Republicans blame this and the failure of Signature Bank in New York on the policies of so-called woke bank managers. North Carolina's highest court, now controlled by Republicans following the November midterms, today weighed reversing a 3-month-old decision aimed at ensuring election maps are drawn fairly. Ahead of today's arguments, critics excoriated the justices for re-examining the redistricting case and a voter ID decision so soon after ruling on them, contending the justices were doing so for partisan reasons instead of legal ones. The Justice Department has fired back at a bid by defense attorneys to have the seditious conspiracy case against the far-right group, the Proud Boys, thrown out based on footage of the January 6th Capitol riot aired by television personality Tucker Carlson. A lawyer for the Proud Boys filed a motion to dismiss the case last week, citing Carlson's show. As he argued, prosecutors withheld surveillance footage from the riot and concocted a lie that an insurrection occurred that day in 2021. Well, Representative George Santos of New York, the embattled freshman facing multiple investigations for his false claims and possible campaign finance violations, filed paperwork today indicating that he intends to seek re-election to Congress. Ron DeSantis, that is, the governor of Florida, backed away from Ukraine, and that angered GOP hawks. The Florida governor, who joined Donald Trump in declaring that defending Ukraine from Russia was not a vital interest, drew swift condemnations from establishment Republicans. And Meta, aka Facebook, is laying off another 10,000 workers. It would be the tech company's second round of cuts since November, when it laid off 11,000 workers. Mark Zuckerberg, its CEO, has declared 2023 the year of efficiency. And at Wellesley College, a fight over whether to admit trans men students will vote today on a non-binding referendum that considers opening admission to all non-binary and transgender applicants. Opponents say the school's mission is to educate women. You're listening to Areva Martin in Real Time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In my first hour, I'm joined by two brilliant contributors: Cal State Director of the Pat Brown Institute, Ralph Sonnenschein, and American University Professor Omikango Dabinga. And also in this hour, KBLA Justice Correspondent Dion Raymond will bring the latest from inside the courtroom in the federal prosecution of LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. And my second hour, it's the great debate. Should historically Black universities and colleges and Greek sororities admit non-Black students? And should these students be allowed to hold leadership roles? This controversy was sparked when Latina Kaylin Perez was crowned Miss Coppin State. Some Black students at this historically Black college had harsh words for this 21-year-old student. Chris Scott and Tiana Smalls are here for the great debate. But here's what I'm thinking about in real time. If you know anything about me, read any of my books, you've heard me talk, you know I grew up in the hood. Yes, in the hood in St. Louis. And I learned a lot in that neighborhood that I grew up in, a neighborhood I cherish to this day. Obviously, these are lessons that Missouri Senator Josh Hawley didn't learn. And the number one lesson you learn in the hood is don't let anybody bump your head. Yes. Don't let people gaslight you. And Hawley, I guess, thinks that he can gaslight and bump the heads of millions of Americans. Him, Ron DeSantis, Carlson Tucker, Donald Trump Jr., and all of the other Trump sycophants are going around claiming that the Silicon Bank failure was not the result of mismanagement from the bankers that controlled that bank, but that it's somehow the fault of what they call, quote unquote, woke investments and the bank's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a bunch of just crap. I guess it is a crock of crap. Give me a break. This bank that catered to tech firms had one Black person on its board. And last I checked, the tech industry is hardly a bastion of diversity. In fact, in 2021, of the top 50 most diverse companies, only three were tech companies. Arguing that Silicon Valley Bank failed because of diversity is like arguing that grass grows without water and sunlight. It just ain't true. This bank failed because of poor financial decisions by its corporate leaders, the same leaders that fought bank regulations that could have prevented the failure. We saw these same arguments in 2008 when the banking crisis was blamed on poor and Black homeowners. This follows long-standing conservative efforts to demonize any attempt to diversify workforces. Plain and simple, these whining, victim-playing Republicans want a corporate workforce that is all white and all male. They don't want Black folks to have anything. They even stole the term woke. And I'm so glad that Senator Elizabeth Warren and other progressive Democrats are super woke and want to hold banks big and small accountable. So stop deflecting and trying to bump our heads. Ron DeSantis, Josh Hawley, Donald Trump Jr. The bank failed because the risk of taking in high volumes of uninsured deposits, they took too many risks. They took in uninsured deposits. And per usual, Wall Street needs a bailout. And when Wall Street needs a bailout, where does it go to? Main Street to bail it out yet again. When we come forward, more with my brilliant contributors right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Need legal help? Attorney Jovan Blacknell is an aggressive trial attorney specializing in criminal defense and civil litigation. Look no further than the law office of Jovan Blacknell. From personal injury to criminal defense, Jovan Blacknell has the knowledge to protect your rights. The law office of Jovan Blacknell understands the stress and anxiety that come with legal issues. That's why the law office of Jovan Blacknell supports the right to a fair trial. For Los Angeles Council member Mark Ridley Thomas, are you facing a legal battle? Log on to fightforjustice.com. Don't go through it alone. Let the law office of Jovan Blacknell fight for your rights. Log on to fightforjustice.com. Let the law office of Jovan Blacknell take the worry and stress out of your case. Call 310-469-9117 today for a free consultation. That's 310-469-9117 or log on to fightforjustice.com. Law office of Jovan Blacknell, where experience and dedication make the difference.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates Women's History Month, sponsored by Walmart. As we celebrate Women's History Month this month, KBLA Talk 1580 would like to spotlight women leaders in our community who are creating positive change. If you or someone you know is making a difference in your community, please nominate them with a 50-word or less post on why you feel they should be included in the KBLA Women's Series, sponsored by Walmart. These women leaders will be featured on KBLA, interviewed on KBLA, and participate in a panel discussion hosted by Areva Martin in real time. Visit the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to nominate a woman in your community that is creating positive change. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
I'm getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20.
So am I, because I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
I'm asking about Prevnar 20 because there's a chance pneumococcal pneumonia could put me in the hospital. Age 65 or older, you may be at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine that can help protect against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. The most commonly reported side effect was pain at the injection site. For additional common side effects and full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
I want to be able to keep my plans.
So I'm asking my doctor about getting vaccinated.
I'm breaking down today's trending news with two incredible contributors. I am joined by Cal State Director of the Pat Brown Institute, Ralph Sonnenschein. Welcome back, Rafe, as you like to be called by friends, and I consider myself a friend.
Well, that's the truth. Nice to be with you again.
Always a pleasure, my friend. And making his debut appearance, I think, on Areva Martin in real time is American University Professor Omikango Dabinga. How are you, Professor Dabinga?
Great. Good to see you.
I know you have a new book coming out. Tell us when it comes out and what's the title and where are we going to be able to find it?
I appreciate it. Well, the pre-order is available now wherever books are sold. It's called Lies About Black People, How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson also wrote the foreword. And we're trying to give people an action plan, a blueprint of what to do to challenge much of the ignorance that you spoke about in your intro. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us have scratched the surface on so many issues, but I want to teach people how to go deeper by teaching them the history of the lies, how they manifest in real time, and then what we can do to challenge them.
Well, let's talk about one of these big lies, and that's the lie that somehow the financial crisis of 2008 was the fault of Black folks and poor homeowners. And we're starting to see the coded language like we saw in 2008. Now the code is woke, and it really just burns my blood, Dr. Dabinga. Woke started as a term used in the African-American community to describe folks who were socially conscious. Now it's become this term that's been co-opted by Republicans to demonize anyone that wants to do anything that, moves this country forward, whether you're talking about gay rights or trans rights or voting rights. The word they like to say is, blame everything on being quote unquote woke. What do you make of even a bank failure? Now, Black folks ain't got nothing to do with that bank failing. We probably didn't have any money in that bank. How is it that we are being blamed, quote unquote, the liberal woke, for the bank failure of Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank in New York?
It's really tragic and not surprising, right? As LBJ said when he was trying to get his poverty programs passed, he said, if you can convince the poorest white person that he's better than the best, back then, the best colored man, he won't realize you're picking his pocket. Give him someone to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. And when they're trying to throw out things like woke and critical race theory, they are giving people someone to look down on, which is primarily Black people. And like you said, it incorporates other groups as well. But the fact of the matter is their followers and their listeners, there's two parts. One, they're not educated enough to know the difference. But two, quite honestly, really, they don't care to know the difference. As Dr. King said, the two most dangerous things on the planet, sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. So they don't mind being either one, because really at the end of the day, it's about the preservation of whiteness. That's how Trump got over. So many people are repeating Trump's strategy as well. And so they throw out these catchwords because they can't say the N-word. I mean, not publicly, but they're saying behind closed doors. So we have to be mindful of that. And I'm so glad that you're calling this out, because people within the Democratic Party, they get so caught up in using the language of the Republicans and of the conservatives that they fail to realize that when you're using the language of your opponents, they're winning. So the Democrats and folks on the quote unquote left should not be embracing terms like woke and critical race theory. They should be saying, you're talking about policies that are going to silence the voices of non-cisgendered white males. That's what it's all about. You are looking at getting rid of policies that are going to impact A, B, and C, whatever community that we're talking about, some of the topics of today, like what's happening with the trans community. We have to be very direct and not using their language, because all they have, Areva, is they co-opted our slang, and our co-opted slang is their policy. Our slang is their policy. We can't let them get away with it.
I know that's crazy, Ray. This notion that these bankers, particularly, let's talk about Silicon Valley. We know it's, in California, and that this bank was somehow too preoccupied with investing in things like companies working on climate change or companies that were trying to address big social issues. I don't know, one of the biggest depositors in this bank is Roku. That's like a media company, so I'm not even sure. Wow. Facts don't matter to this mob, but what do you make of this, Rafe? Trying to blame any policy. And again, I saw an article that said Silicon Valley Bank had one Black person on its board. So I don't know about all this diversity that they're claiming was the focus of these managers.
Well, you can't win with that. I mean, this is repealing the law of cause and effect after repealing civil rights laws. What we know for a fact is that in 2010, President Obama signed the Dodd-Frank Act that would have put some limits on regional banks. They complained, and when Donald Trump got elected in 2018, he got rid of most of it. So cause and effect is actually the simplest argument to make, which is you're saying DEI because you don't want to say the other thing, and you don't want us to talk about that. And by the way, every time we come in, we have to clean up whatever mess you've created in the Now, that's something voters actually understand, those two things. If this building was hit by a crane right now, the same people who said this about the bank would say this was caused by DEI. And essentially, it's simply now, when you ask them what DEI is and what woke is, there's no second sentence to say what it is. And when you poll it as it actually is, it actually polls very well with the majority of voters. There's some recent polls on this. So it's really a holding action that shows their weakness, not their strength. Because
they definitely, as you said, don't want to talk about those regulations that they fought in 2018 that they supported Donald Trump in eroding and, doing away with. And that's why Elizabeth Warren has been on this terror, but, over the weekend and the last 2 days talking about how these banks, the very same people who fought to deregulate and to be dismissive of regulations that could have prevented this, are now blaming it, deflecting blame and picking the boogeyman, right? This straw man. And I don't know what else wokeism can be. I mean, it has been blamed for everything. Let's go with earthquakes and the storms in California. It's snowing in California because of wokeism. I mean,
your team loses the Super Bowl. It's all because of DEI.
No limits. But we were talking before the show got started about college, both of you reminiscing about what great days. You remember your college days. What do you make, Professor Domingo, over at Wellesley College and this fight about admitting trans men? Some students are saying, wait, this college is dedicated to the education of women. We don't want non-binary and transgender students to attend our university.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge fight. One thing that I've seen is that when a university or a company really gets deeply entrenched in its trans views one way or the other, it's going to be hard to fight. Over the last 3 years or so, I've had at least one trans student in 3 of my classes as it is now. And so, to be quite honest, if they didn't say who they were, that they were trans, you would never know. Right. And so I think that if a school particularly is going to embrace inclusion and embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging beyond its mission statement, I think that it needs to be mindful of getting with the new times and accepting people as they define themselves. And I feel like I don't know what's going to happen there, but I feel like it's definitely going to get uglier before any type of resolve is going to be made. But if we're going to talk about, and maybe get into this later, but you already mentioned this, before, if we're going to talk about things that governors are doing, like DeSantis and other things with trans communities as well, we have to be mindful of our university spaces as well, that we claim to be safe spaces, but we have to really ask the question, how safe are they if we're going to be exclusionary at certain levels? It's one thing to talk about this group as long as they're over there, but once they come into your space, that's when you really start to get called out.
Yeah, and Rafe, we've seen this fight with locker rooms. We've seen it with, PE classes. And now this is a university, and this isn't a university in Florida. It's not a university in Texas. This is a university in Massachusetts, right? I think I'm right about where
it's
this
my home state. Yes, it is.
Down the street from Harvard. So this is in the liberal, state or, county, Boston. I don't know what county Boston is in, but it's supposed to be a liberal university. Let's just be clear about that. And if you have students there saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want trans students admitted, this is, as Dr. Domingo said, this is going to get very ugly.
You know what I think? I think, though, that society usually outruns institutions on these things. In other words, people in families who are working through this issue with their children, with their spouses, with friends, are way past where the institutions are in many ways. And eventually it'll take time, but the institutions will catch up. That's not true of all issues, but in this one, we're all knowing people whose families are engaged in this question, and they're not engaged as an institution. They're engaged as a loving family. And I think you're going to find a lot more acceptance and a lot more people rising up in Florida and saying, leave my kid alone. Which is one of the most compelling arguments you can make against the kind of hateful stuff being in Florida, is leave my kid alone. I'm going to protect my child from these laws. So this may be one case where society is going to get there first.
Yeah, it's interesting because what do you make, though, Dr. Dibinga? We have a lot of single sex or same sex schools. So if you are a high school that's dedicated to the education of men, we know that got to be really popular, right? Particularly with Black students. There were these schools in Chicago, I'm thinking of, in New York, that were targeted, saying, well, we can do better. We can improve the academic, scores of Black kids if we can get them in these single sex schools. Should those schools, should they have to, should they be looking to redefine their mission and allowing in other kinds, students who are trans, students who are non-binary?
I think that if there are people who are identifying as a particular gender, I feel like they should have an opportunity to be in these spaces and places. And for many of our schools, particularly schools that were started or created for Black men or for Black women, we have to go back to the original reasons why these schools were started. A lot of it had to do with discrimination, not being able to be placed in the PWIs, and to be able to create safe spaces for ourselves. And the trans community is not large enough that we can go across the country and have them have their own schools, which some people would advocate for, which would be ridiculous. But they are a targeted group right now. They're being heavily discriminated against. When I think about the CPAC conference that happened a few weeks ago or days ago, whenever it was, and they had this supremely anti-trans agenda, I was thinking, what would the reaction have been if we substituted what they said about trans people for Black people or Jewish people or Latinos or any group, right? And so we have to be mindful of that as we work to create the spaces. And universities, this is, like you said, Wellesley's in Massachusetts. I've spoken there, been there multiple times. This is where we have to test how committed they are. And if they're not going to do it and other schools won't do it, they have to make a stance and actually redefine how they are defining men and women, which is going to go against the values that they have generally stated. And I would really be surprised if there are more students at Wellesley who are against this than are supportive of it. But, the people who are against can have a larger voice most oftentimes.
Yeah, we've seen that. Speaking of those loud voices, what do you make, Rafe, of George Santos? He said, I'm not resigning defiantly. I don't care how many reveals of my, falsified resume you come up with. I don't care how many violations of finance laws that I've committed or that you catch me on. I'm here to stay. And now today he said, damn it, I'm running again.
Well, all I can say is anytime he says anything, the odds are pretty good it's not true. So you should start with that. He may not have a treasurer for his campaign account. He may have made that up. He's tweaking his fellow Republicans who are trying to figure out what to do with this gigantic embarrassment. He originally gave the impression he wouldn't run again so that they would leave him alone. But now he's hanging out with all the right wingers there. They love him. So he's sort of embedded himself in the Marjorie Greene caucus so they can't touch him. So my guess is he'll actually run for re-election and get absolutely destroyed. I think that he'll be the Republican nominee and they'll lose that seat. If he actually has a treasurer, if he actually signs his name to something and actually is on the ballot, and where do you go?
Yeah, I think Dr. Dibinga, he might find solace with people like Tucker Carlson, the guy who has the 44,000 hours of exclusive video from the Capitol riot insurrection. that now is being used by the Proud Boys to file a motion in court to say, look, Your Honor, the prosecution withheld this evidence that has been manipulated by Tucker Carlson that shows this wasn't a riot. This was a peaceful gathering. So might George Santos find, support not only with the Marjorie Greens of the world, but the Fox network? Seemingly that's going to be a significant ally for him.
Oh, absolutely. And somebody once said that if Nixon had Fox at the time, he could have survived Watergate at the end of the day. So George Santos will absolutely find his way to a man in Tucker Carlson, who said, he's on record as saying, I lie. When I'm cornered, when my back's against the wall, I lie. Then with these cases that we've seen with Dominion and the like, it has been proven that this is their industry. Their industry is built on lying. So George Santos, this is probably the only legal job George Santos can get. So he has no desire to lose it. And he's going to do anything possible. And I agree with you that Fox is ready to take him along with them, along with the Marjorie Taylor Greens and all the other liars who are part of that caucus.
Yeah, no doubt that there's probably not a lot of employers out there waiting to hire George Santos. So this is it for him. And he might as well give it everything he has to try to stay in office. And who knows, the Democrats were asleep at the switch when he got elected, and that might happen again. We're going to have more into today's trending news when we come forward. But first, our justice correspondent, Deion Raymond, is here for the latest in that federal bribery trial involving LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. She's been in court all day. She brings us gavel to gavel coverage on that trial, what's happening, what we can expect when we come forward after some news, sports, and traffic. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Julius White. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Efforts by activists may lead to changes in the way Georgians vote. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports Republican groups have been challenging voters' eligibility, leading to pushback from those who claim their efforts could lead to disenfranchisement. Now they want the state's election laws overhauled to safeguard the rights of legitimate voters. Devin Keith, a Black man, was arrested early last month for allegedly shoplifting from Walmart stores. Now he faces a bench trial at the Madison County Courthouse that's set for May 10th. Keith stated after the initial charge that he accidentally left the store with a $20 pair of headphones. And President Biden says Jimmy Carter asked him to deliver his eulogy when the former president dies. 98-year-old Carter entered home hospice care in Georgia last month after a series of recent hospital stays. I'm Julius White on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Heads up in Pasadena, 210 westbound between Altadena Drive over to Allen Avenue. The right lane is flooded. In Industry, 605 northbound at the 60, got a crash on the right shoulder of the connector to the 60 westbound. Also in Hawthorne, 105 eastbound before Crenshaw Boulevard, disabled vehicle in the middle lane. And in Baldwin Park on the 10 eastbound before you get to the 605, another disabled vehicle. This time it's blocking the carpool lane.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. Visit jpmorganchase.com/racial equity and get the tools to help reach your financial goals.
Progressive Commercial Insurance can protect your small business with over 30 coverage options, an easy-to-use mobile app, personalized discounts, and more. Get a quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers start a 2-game road trip tonight in New Orleans. The Lakers, 2 games under 500, are tied with New Orleans for the 9th spot in the Western Conference. Texas Southern, one of 2 HBCU schools in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, kicks off the tournament tomorrow with a play-in game against Farley Dickinson. They meet up at 3:40 p.m. in Dayton, Ohio on True TV. Texas Southern qualified by winning the SWAC tournament title. Howard, champions of the MEAC Conference, play top-seeded Kansas Thursday at 11 a.m. in Des Moines, Iowa. You can catch that game on TBS. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete's.
Aaron from Original Taco Pete's here, inviting you to our newest location at 3272 West Slauson off Crenshaw for Taco Tuesday, only $175. Call 323-348 4441 to order.
KBLA Talk 1580 would like to thank all of the businesses that tune into KBLA at work. We celebrate you, your calls to the station, and your overall support. To show our appreciation, we would like to treat your office to lunch for 10, sponsored by John O'Groats family-owned restaurant and johnogroats.us. Open the KBLA Talk 1580 app or log on to KBLA1580.com to submit your office to be selected for our Office of the Week. We know you're just like our staff, putting in many hard, smart working hours per week. We just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. You and your staff deserve lunch on us. Enter your office to win lunch for 10 and be highlighted on KBLA Talk 1580 as our Office of the Week. Open the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to enter your office today to become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. Sponsored by John O'Groats family-owned restaurant and johnogroats.us. Become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
Are your utility bills getting hard to pay? Get some relief with Easy Save. Income qualified LADWP customers can save money on their bills and discover even more savings. Learn how and apply today at ladwp.com/easy save. That's ladwp.com/easy save. Saving money made easy with Easy Save.
Our Weekly Los Angeles is the largest audited Black newspaper in the state of California with a distribution of over 50,000 copies weekly. Pick up a copy every Thursday to get the latest news on African American communities of LA. You can also keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and surrounding cities by going to www.ourweekly.com. The Our Weekly website is updated daily with the current news about us and for us. For your advertising needs, Our Weekly offers economical advertising packages to fit your budget. Feel free to call Our Weekly Los Angeles at 323-905-1300 or visit the website at www.ourweekly.com. Our Weekly Los Angeles, reporting news that matters to you.
This is Areva Martin in real time, and this is our daily legal segment. This is the most comprehensive coverage of the federal bribery trial involving LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. KBLA's justice correspondent Dion Raymond has been in that courthouse all day, and she is here to give us the download on what happened in court. Hello, Dion.
Hi, Areva. And let me tell you, today's activities in court were in no way dulled by the rain. My theme for today is notes from a diary of a criminal attorney, present and past. And one of the main lessons I learned when I was practicing criminal defense was that things are never what they appear. Big lesson. And I feel that the defense did a really good job in doing that in cross-examination today of the government's main witness, a former employee who worked very closely with Marilyn Flynn, the former dean of USC's School of Social Work. And so what was the government trying to do today? Well, they were trying to show that Marilyn Flynn pushed through admissions of Mark Ridley Thomas's son, Sebastian Ridley Thomas, SRT. What they were trying to show is that Marilyn Flynn approved a scholarship for SRT, and that Marilyn Flynn also wanted to expedite hiring SRT for a professor of practice position for the School of Social Welfare and for the School of Public Policy. And I'm just reiterating this for those who may just now be coming into this story. And so none of these things are illegal. But what they're trying to show is that all of this was done in exchange for votes by MRT. And today what they focused on was a contract with USC and the Department of Probation to create a probation university. So what the defense showed, now they were very smart about it and very efficient. Let me tell you, Areva, the government had this witness on direct for about 4 hours.
And let me just stop you, Dan. This isn't even the FBI agents who we know are supposed to show up in this trial. And according to the prosecution, they have 10 hours of direct examination plan for the FBI agents. So here we are, week 2. We know this judge has told the prosecution, get your case over in 2 weeks. So they're into week 2. They only have 4 days. They only have court on Tuesday through Friday. They have 4 days. And they spent a whole day with an employee from the an ex-employee from the university. What possibly could they hope the jurors take away from hearing this, what I believe to be a disgruntled witness, right? Wasn't she, did she have beef with the Dean Marilyn Flynn?
Well, the defense, the way they put it was, didn't your relationship sour? And this particular witness, who was well prepped, she had been interviewed 5 times, as recent as yesterday and last week. She was very direct with the government, not so much with the defense. And so the defense used her own interview with the FBI and the government lawyers. And even using their documents, she still wouldn't fully commit to it. She still wouldn't fully admit it, even though she did admit that she felt that a lot of the dean's initiatives were unrealistic and referred to them as death missions. So what the defense was able to show, in other words, Areva, that her style of working was to expedite things, and that her doing so with SRT was just her way of working, wasn't so unusual.
And I know, Deanna, a big part, the prosecution's case, power, privilege, and lies. And I've been calling this a trial of innuendos, assumptions, and misinformation. And I think that misinformation point was made again today, because the prosecution tried to establish that this whole notion of a contract between the county and its probation department in USC was hatched by Mark Ridley Thomas and Dean Flynn in order to further this conspiracy to get his son hired. And wasn't the defense able to show, contrary to that prosecution, Mark Ridley Thomas has been working on issues of probation and reentry into the community for years, dating back even before his son went to the state legislature, or before his son was even thought about as a potential student or professor at the University of Southern California.
Absolutely. Again, the defense was just stealth in this matter. The time frame for this case is 2017, 2018. And Mark Ridley Thomas's efforts and support of a reentry program and a relationship between USC and the probation department dates back many years prior to this time frame. In fact, what we learned today, Areva, is that an official at USC was concerned about the reentry program office being located so closely to the campus. And there were officials at USC who said, okay, let's get MRT involved in this. So by their own initiative, they reached out to him on this particular matter.
Yeah, well before this alleged conspiracy between Flynn and Mark Ridley Thomas. I know you're going to be back in court tomorrow, Dion, all day with this assistant that worked for the dean of the School of Social Work. What are you expecting tomorrow and the rest of the week, given that the judge has told the prosecution, get this case done in 2 weeks?
Her admonishments have turned out to really be lip service, because they sure are plodding along slowly. And they're moving on to a witness that they started just at the end of the day. So they're still basing their case on witnesses and evidence that has come out of USC. So I think that they will continue with that, and they may get on to the others, hopefully sooner than later.
All right, Deanne, thank you. We know you will be back in court tomorrow. We know you will be continuing to bring us the most comprehensive coverage of this trial, the United States of America versus Mark Ridley Thomas. We will continue to stay on this case. We appreciate your coverage. We appreciate you out in the rain. We know it was a rainy day in LA, but again, some of the best coverage occurring with respect to this trial right here on KBLA Talk 1580. When we come forward, more with my contributors and today's trending news.
In real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut broke records opening weekend. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by Lendistry. The highly anticipated Creed 3 premiered in theaters early March. The film is Michael B. Jordan's first time directing and starring in a film. Creed 3 is the third movie of the successful franchise. Not only has it broken global opening weekend records, earning over $100 million worldwide, but it's also the biggest opening ever for a Black director in their directorial debut. It was also the biggest opening weekend of all Creed movies.
Thanks to our new sponsor, Lendistry. Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered in Los Angeles. Lendistry helps small business owners access the affordable capital needed to grow. Visit Lendistry, LENDISTRY.com/KBLA today.
Law Office of J. Blacknell understands the stress and anxiety that comes with legal issues. That's why we support the right to a fair trial for Los Angeles Councilmember Mark Willie Thomas. Do you have a criminal or civil rights matter? If so, please give us a call at 310-469-9117.
If you feel sick, test to know if it's COVID. Treat it. Medication is key to slow the virus in your body. Beat it. Recover smoother. You may test negative sooner. California, you know you need it. Test it, treat it, you can beat it.
Yeah. Visit youcanbeatit.org or call 833-422-4255 to ask for medication to treat COVID-19. Sponsored by the California Department of Public Health.
The U.S. premiere of the official Bob Marley One Love Experience has arrived in Los Angeles. Open now through April 23rd at Ovation Hollywood on the corner of Hollywood and Highland. Tickets start at $20 plus fees and are available at BobMarleyEXP.com. That's BobMarleyEXP.com. Get your tickets today.
KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for voting rights. When We All Vote is a leading national nonpartisan initiative on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election by helping to close the race and age gap. Created by Michelle Obama, When We All Vote brings together individuals, institutions, brands, and organizations to register new voters across the country and advance civic education for the entire family and voters of every age to build an informed and engaged electorate for today and generations to come. When We All Vote empowers their supporters and volunteers to take action through voting, advocating for their rights, and holding their elected officials accountable. Please visit whenweallvote.org to stand up for your rights, voting rights. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. In this hour, we are breaking down today's trending news with my brilliant contributors. In hour two, we are going to be debating, should non-Black students be admitted into historically Black colleges and universities? And once there, should they be allowed to hold leadership roles? I have two brilliant debaters who are going to help us shed some light on that topic. But in this hour, back with me, Cal State Director of the Pat Brown Institute, Ralph Sonnenschein, and American University Professor Omikango Dabinga. Dr. Dabinga, I want to ask you about this 10,000 people, Facebook, I know they have a new name, Meta, but most of us know it as Facebook, laying off, and that's after 11,000 people were laid off in November. What does this tell us about the state of tech in this country?
To be quite honest, I feel what it means is that Facebook or Meta, like you said, and all of these other tech companies, they're expanding their global reach, and they don't really care much for or need people in America to be working for them. I mean, you have places across the world where they don't have access to internet, and as they're getting more access to things like broadband, they got to sign contracts with Facebook. I mean, the global reach of Facebook is incredible, and just like how we see physical labor as it relates to products that are created, our sneakers and shoes and things that are coming from other countries, I believe that what's happening in the tech space is just being farmed out to other places, and Meta doesn't want to pay people working in America fair wages and don't need their skill set anymore because they can get it cheaper. People feel like this can't happen in digital spaces, but I feel like that is true, and I think that Facebook is also getting away with a lot of atrocities. I mean, right now, we saw what they did in the 2016 election and how they helped their algorithms to amplify hate, but they also have been involved in other areas around the world with the Rohingya, who have also experienced more hate because of the way the Facebook algorithms have targeted them. So they have been really engaged in some nefarious activities across the world, and back home, they're just getting rid of their workers because they frankly don't need them anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty scary. And I'm just thinking of all of those young people who had gotten accustomed to those really high-paying jobs at places like Facebook and Google and some of these other big tech companies are paying. Now they've got to go back out into the real world and see that most companies aren't, giving them six-figure salaries and gyms and free lunch and free snacks. They got to come back down to earth. Oh, that's going to be a hard fall for many of them. Rafe, our president, your president, some folks say he's moving away from progressives on hot button issues like climate change as he readies himself for a 2024 run. Is that dangerous for Joe Biden?
Joe Biden is threading a very narrow needle here. I don't know if that's the right metaphor. The Inflation Reduction Act is one of the largest climate change investments in the history of the United States. He established his credibility with that. He's talked about not expanding oil drilling, but right now Saudi Arabia is on the verge of taking over the entire Middle East. They've just made a deal with China and Iran. They've just reported the largest revenue they've had probably ever. Russia is surviving its invasion of Ukraine by its oil supplies. So I think what he's also saying is we can't get to a green energy future by getting rid of oil immediately right now for geopolitical reasons, and also because we're not there yet. Now, I wish he hadn't done this, but I'm not willing to say at this point that he's betrayed the entire climate change effort, because he's threading that needle. It's partly about what's happening in the world as well as what's happening here. It's a hard argument to make, because people who love oil want to drill everywhere, and most people don't want any drilling in oil. So the argument for some drilling is a tough one. I mean, you got to really thread that needle. Can I say something about the previous question about tech, though,
Sure.
Areva, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely.
I feel very badly for the people who are getting laid off. A lot of them are people I know and have known throughout my life, and they're really suffering. But the overall economy added 311,000 jobs in the last week, and most of those are blue-collar jobs. Because one success Biden has had is he's the first president in decades who actually has built the economy from the bottom up. He's invested a fortune in jobs that, unlike, and you're exactly right, what you were saying, Dr. Bingham, about overseas Facebook. These are domestic jobs in factories that aren't going to move, that people can get union jobs, and the unemployment rate's only under 4%. So tech's problems are not killing the economy because he's building it from the bottom up. It's a lot more resilient than the economy used to be.
Yeah, and obviously we know the blue collar worker, the middle class workers in this country have pretty much been eliminated, those jobs. I was just thinking about growing up in St. Louis, where there were auto plants, and people's fathers and uncles in this time period, and mothers, but women and men worked in these plants, and they were able to buy homes. They were able to send their kids to college. They were able to retire with some kind of nest egg. They had good health insurance. I grew up in a union family. I'm pro-union, and I love the fact that we're creating jobs for people who don't necessarily have to have an engineering degree and don't have to have a PhD behind their name. No offense, Dr. Domingo. I love that you have a PhD behind your name. But only so many people are going to be capable of accomplishing what you accomplished academically and educationally. So we need jobs for everybody in this economy. But I am a little worried, Dr. Domingo, about Biden and this Alaskan oil drilling project, because this goes against a very promise that he made during his election campaign. And we know the Democrats are big tent. We know they're progressives and they're centrists and moderates and all these different names we have for ourselves. Do you think Biden is taking a calculated risk on that project in particular, because he's going to get hammered in the primary by progressives on this climate issue?
I think that he is taking a calculated risk, but I also think that this is a warning that all of us who have supported Biden should really heed. And the warning to me is this: we need to stay on him. We're talking about the environment now, but we saw what also happened in DC as relates to the reversal of the crime bill. And so when we talk about the climate change thing, he's put out a lot of promises, the infrastructure plan as well, but he can kind of show that he can sway a little bit if people don't really continue to pressure him. And so I think this could actually be good for the Democratic Party, because it can be a reminder of don't get comfortable with Biden. Keep pushing him, keep challenging him. People are saying, as it relates to his agenda within the Black community, some within his administration feel like they've done enough. And of course, they've done great things, but we want more. We don't want to be settling. And so when you look at Alaska right now, I think this is prime time for us to really start to, for lack of a better term, prime the pump as it relates, as it relates to challenging him. And you can't go back on these promises. You said you wanted to be the best president as it relates to climate change in the history of the United States. As you said, you want to be the best president for unions, for Black people and the like. We have to hold him to that. And this is a great time to do it before he starts to launch his next campaign.
Well, speaking of an issue that's important to Black folks, you mentioned that DC issue, that bill that was, I guess, passed by the DC city council members, but even the mayor who didn't support it, that was going to reduce some of the sentencing in terms for certain classes of criminals. Speak to us about that, Dr. Dominga. And then, Rafe, I want to ask you about the San Francisco Board of Supervisors who are hearing the proposal that Black folks, Dr. Dominga, are going to get $5 million if you can check certain boxes in San Francisco if that reparations plan is accepted by the San Francisco board. So let's talk about, Dr. Dominga, talk to us about what's happening in D.C. and why that could be dangerous for Biden around that crime bill.
Well, absolutely. Well, here in D.C., we've always had our issues of taxation without representation, and there's been a fight for decades for D.C. statehood. And when Obama came in, obviously he had the support of Washington, D.C. And so when you have this battle looming continuing with the city council and the mayor and other people in D.C., you have a bill that Joe Biden basically said he's going to side with the Republicans on as it relates to overturning it. And it was the first time in about 30 years that a bill that was introduced in Washington, D.C. had been overturned. And so that also riled a lot of people up. A lot of people weren't even around here to remember when that happened. And so people are saying, hey, you say that you support people to be able to take care of themselves and self-rule, but you're going to go and overturn this policy that the city council voted on. And so there's a lot of tension. And yes, like you said, the mayor didn't support it, but we also have to understand that DC has had laws in place as it relates to anti-crime that are more stringent than some of these Republican-run cities. And so people want to talk about DC as it's, of course, crime is an issue here. We have carjackings are on the rise. I'm not going to say it's not an issue, but people are acting like there have never been laws in place and that we're just running around all willy-nilly. There have been strong laws on the books. They need to be better enforced for sure. But really, at the end of the day, I don't feel like this is something that Biden should have stepped in just because the Republicans are always doing a great job of making themselves appear to be stronger on crime. I don't think this is a fight that Biden should have got involved in. Let us handle our business here.
Yeah, and I guess I had that opinion, but then when I saw your mayor, who was also vetoing this bill, does that change anybody's perspective, Dr. Dominga, that Biden is not just siding with the Republicans, he's siding with the mayor, duly elected mayor of D.C.?
It does, and there's no doubt about it. It does definitely give Biden a little bit of a leeway as relates to that, because he's not completely abandoning DC. But you have the city council that's made up of representatives from all of the wards, and so the idea was that they had a stronger collective voice, and they represented the people at a larger level than the mayor, who clearly everybody didn't vote for.
Right. All right. Last topic, Rafe. Are we getting that $5 million? I don't live in San Francisco, but I could manage to move there if the $5 million was going to be made available.
Me too.
Have shoes with travel. Let me just put it like that.
Headlines really can get to people. And, all the headlines say $5 million per person in San Francisco. Now, I actually read the report today, the whole report. It's very interesting. And the 5 million is not the most interesting thing in the report. It's actually one of the most thorough policy proposals in multiple areas to address racial inequity in one city. I think it should be read very carefully. It has education, housing, healthcare, every issue in there. The reparations issue has moved a lot. It isn't necessarily there yet. And the supervisors are going to only hear it for the first time this week. There's months to go. The cities and the state are in a budget crisis. This is going to be a tough time to talk about money. And it's a political hot potato. But you know what's going on in the rest of the country is a battle about whether we should talk about slavery at all. And the more discussion there is about really trying to understand the economics of slavery over time, over generations, it now generates this other argument that it should be illegal for a teacher to mention that slavery might have been, say, I don't know, a bad thing. So
that Black folks might have been immigrants or tourists, maybe.
Who knew?
Say,
Who
right?
knew?
Might have been willing tourists. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that at a time when San Francisco, Boston, Detroit, Evanston, Illinois, Palm Springs, California, lots of places around this country are looking at reparations. Places like Texas and Florida are saying, well, wait a minute, we don't even know if slavery's a thing. Oh, Lord have mercy.
But this is kind of how it goes. It goes back and forth. You make some movement in one direction. It's like a law of physics. There's always this.
The yin and yang, right? Of policy making. We're going to follow what happens in San Francisco, obviously, very closely. Thank you so much, Ralph Sonnenschein, that is. And thank you, Dr. Omikango Dabinga. Brilliant minds. Really appreciate your input and insights today and being guest on Areva Martin in real time. We'll see both of you again real soon, I hope.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks.
In hour two, the great debate, Black folks, non-Black folks, who should be allowed into Black institutions and what role should they play once they get there? We're going to debate that. I'm also taking your calls in hour two, 1-800-920-1580. Give me a call if you have a comment or a question or an opinion about who should be allowed to lead Black institutions. After news, sports, and traffic, we're breaking it all down with two of my other favorite contributors. I guess I'm like a mother. Everybody's my favorite. So I just love everybody that comes on to the show with their brilliance because they make the show smarter. They make me smarter. Stay with us right here on KBLA Talk 1580.